your son has a severe case of autism. This is a lifelong condition. This is a hopeless condition. He's never going to be able to communicate in any meaningful way, or talk, or make friends, or go to a typical school.
I never want to look at my child and think or see terrible. I'm going to think hope. He emerged completely from this so-called hopeless and irreversible condition, actually becoming a highly verbal, an incredibly interactive, a wonderfully curious, awesomely bright youngster.
I'm pleased to welcome Roun Kaufmann.
Hello. Good evening. It's really nice to see you guys. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about this evening because, I get the chance to speak at a lot of different conferences, and there's a lot of incredibly educated and knowledgeable people who do presentations. But what often happens is there's a lot of theory discussed, and then I still have parents coming up to me and saying, okay, that was really interesting to hear. Now, how do I get my child to speak? Or, that was really interesting to hear, but now, what do I do when my child's screaming and biting? So tonight is really focused on giving all of you some really practical strategies that you can, hopefully if you want to, put into action immediately upon leaving the lecture. In order to do that, though, it entails really giving you a history of the Sunrise program and of all the principles that we're going to talk about so you can understand how they work and why they work. And it really starts with my own story and my own history, and that started when I was diagnosed as severely autistic as a young boy. And when I say severely autistic, I had no language. I was completely mute. I didn't look at anyone, including my parents. I had no eye contact. I didn't allow myself to be touched. I would spend my days doing repetitive behaviors like spinning plates over and over again, or flapping my hands in front of my face, or rocking back and forth. I actually had a tested IQ of less than 30. My parents were told, this is a really severe case. And, I talked to a lot of people who say getting the diagnosis of an autism spectrum disorder is really devastating. I actually don't think it's the diagnosis itself that feels devastating for most people. In fact, for many parents I talk to, they actually say in some cases it's actually a relief because you know what's going on. What I think can absolutely feel devastating for a lot of people is the prognosis. All the predictions of all the things that your child is never going to be able to do in the future. And clearly my parents received such prognoses as well. So my parents were told, look, your son has a severe case of autism. This is a lifelong condition. This is a hopeless condition. He's never going to be able to communicate in any meaningful way, or talk, or make friends, or go to a typical school, or own his own home, or live on his own, or have a job, or have a girlfriend, or all the things that for many of us we take for granted when we have a typical child. This was deemed simply not in the cards for me. And my parents were told, listen, you have 2 daughters, focus your time and attention on them, because your son is going to eventually need to be put in an institution where he can be properly managed and properly taken care of. And if you do put him in an institution, we might be able to, over the years, teach him some self-care skills, like we may be able to teach him to eat with silverware, or maybe to dress himself in the morning one day. But that's pretty much the ceiling of what you can hope for your son. And of course, I always really make sure that when I'm doing a lecture tour around the UK or the US or any other country, I always make sure I take a special entourage of people to dress me in the morning. So I think that's important to, of course, some of you are laughing, some of you are like, so just so you all, that's called a joke, right? I've been dressing myself for a few decades now, so we can put that one to rest. But I do joke about it, because the reason why is because it was said with such a sense of finality and such a sense of truth that this is simply the way it's going to be, and there's really no other possibilities in the cards for you or for your son. And, in the face of that, my parents did something really, really amazing. And by the way, this is, look at him. That's me as a little kid. You can see I'm really into these cups, much more into inanimate objects like that than I was into people. And first of all, please allow me to put a question to rest that's probably burning in many of your minds, which is, how did this adorably cute boy with all that hair turn into this not as cute guy with no hair? You know what? It's a question I've pondered myself many times. I can assure you it is not a side effect of the Sunrise program. But anyway, the thing that I do want to point out about this picture is that I actually do look very happy and involved in what I'm doing. And I think this points to and really crystallizes something that is so amazing and beautiful and incredible about our children, that makes them really different from a lot of other children, even other children who have disorders or disabilities. And that is this: our children are not banging on the door begging to be let out. They're not going around saying, please cure me of this horrific disorder. You know, I want to be part of your world. I don't want to be the way I am. They're not saying that, right? They're not saying, Mom, Dad, the whole pooing in a diaper thing, it's disgusting, it's gross. If you could teach me to be toilet trained, that would be great. They're not saying that. Our children are actually, they're in a world that works for them. It's us who want our children to grow and change. And why shouldn't we want that? That's a great thing to want. But the point is once we realize that the main thrust of that, in most cases, is coming from us, that actually gives us some good information, because we can start to really see that, okay, if we're the ones who want our children to grow and change and join us in our world, it's up to us to really get them behind it the way that we're behind it. It's up to us to really get them involved the way we want them to be involved. It's up to us to sell our world to our children so that they want it as much as we want it for them. And that's an important keystone to keep your mind on. So what did my parents do? My parents, they took me home. They turned their back on really all of these dire prognoses and predictions. And they designed and developed their own home-based, child-centered program, where they worked with me for a little over 3 years. And of course, this is a great picture of the Sunrise program in action, the first Sunrise program. This is my mom working with me. And by the way, that you are correctly seeing that is a bathroom. We don't advocate that you do your Sunrise programs in bathrooms, but that was actually where she spent several years with me when I was little. And that was the beginning of what is now a really well put together, honed version of what we've developed into the Sunrise program playroom, workroom environment, which is an environment for really optimized learning and interaction, which I will touch on briefly in this lecture. And it's something we go into a lot of detail in our training programs as well. So this was the beginnings of that. And one of the things that was great about this was it was a really distraction-free environment where there wasn't a lot of extra stimulation happening. And at the same time, it was an environment where my mother didn't have to say no to a lot of things, the way you would, for instance, in a kitchen. And she didn't have to say, don't touch that, that's dangerous. This was an area where she could just focus on building that interaction level and that relationship with me. So after a little over 3 years of this, I recovered completely from my autism without any trace of my former condition. I went on to just live a regular life as a regular guy. I went to typical school. I had typical friends who didn't know about my history unless I told them. I went on to graduate from Brown University with a degree in biomedical ethics. And all of these things, which again were deemed not in the cards for me, were now things that became part of my life, and only because my parents decided to do what they did, and they did something really different than the conventional wisdom and what they were really told to do. And I'm going to try and really give to you all of the tools that my parents used that made my whole life possible, and that since then, over the decades, we've now used with thousands of other children to help them progress far beyond their prognoses as well. And ultimately, after graduating, I directed an educational center for typical school-age children for a while. And now I lecture and teach in the Sunrise program and do lectures internationally, so that ultimately this is a program and tools that people can have access to, which is why we've tried to give you guys access to this tonight. One of the things that I think is really missing in today's world, especially in trying to help people with autism, is and this is true in the US too, but it's more true even in the UK, is that there's just not enough options presented to people. So I talk to a lot of parents who say, this really makes sense, this sounds logical, this has really helped my child, but I wish I had known about it earlier. And that's the kind of thing where it's not like everybody should be told, you must do the Sunrise program, but everybody should be given, hey, these are 5 or 6 options that you can do, and explain that instead of shuttled into one tunnel, oftentimes a very hopeless tunnel where you're told there's just not a lot that's available for your child. So this is what happened actually. Ultimately, after my recovery, my father, Barry Neil Kaufman, who is an author, he wrote the book Sunrise, S-O-N-R-I-S-E. This is actually the current, more expanded version called Sunrise, The Miracle Continues. The reason why that is it actually has 5 other stories laid in the book of 5 other families who've used this program with their own children and had really remarkable results as well. So that's that book, and that was originally a bestseller and then turned into an NBC television movie, which was viewed by many millions of people from around the world, and then people started to come to my parents and say, can you help us? Can we learn some of these tools to help our own children? And so in 1983, my parents founded what is now known as the Autism Treatment Center of America, which is a part of a nonprofit charitable organization in Sheffield, Massachusetts, as you can see. And at this organization, we really focus on helping parents and caregivers and professionals and family members to really enable their children to dramatically improve in all areas of learning, communication, skill development, and overall development as well. And we help parents and professionals to really implement and maintain their own Sunrise programs, either at home or sometimes in a school environment as well. Probably what is most relevant to most of you who are sitting here is something called the Sunrise Program Startup. The Sunrise Program Startup is a week-long training program that's really designed to give you everything that you need to start up and begin this program. Now let's jump directly into the principles. In order to understand how the principles all fit together, it's important to get this key piece of the Sunrise program, because it's based upon this idea that the children show us the way in, and then we show them the way out. Okay, that's important, because a lot of us, we love the second half of the sentence. Right? I'm going to show them the way out, right? I'm going to get them to act normal and stuff and talk and stop doing those behaviors and all. Yeah. And you know what? We want that for you too. We want to help your child grow and change and connect more with you. But what we've really seen is that if we want to show our children the way out and help them cross that bridge over to our world, first, we actually have to join them in their world. First, we have to build a bridge from our world to their world and connect with them on their terms. So that rather than forcing these children to conform to a world that they don't yet understand, we start by building a connection in their world that they can understand, and then using that relationship that we've built up as basically a doorway to help our children then start to walk into our world and connect with us on our terms and learn the things that are going to be useful for them to learn in our world as well. It's a really important key piece to understand, and that actually leads into the very first breakthrough strategy that we're going to talk about this evening. And that is, I have to tell you, this is probably the most controversial principle of the Sunrise program, definitely one of them. And it's called joining. And here's how joining works. All of those, quote, stimming behaviors that your children do, that everybody's trying to get them to stop doing, right? All those repetitive, ongoing behaviors that everyone's trying to get them to just stop. Not only do we not stop your children from doing those behaviors, but we actually participate in and join in with those very behaviors. Actually participating in them. And it's not some con game, by the way. It's not some situation where we're copying or mimicking or imitating or mirroring. I hear those words used a lot. That's actually not what we do. It's not something where a child's flapping and I'm like, okay, how long do I have to do this before he looks at me? All right. It's not about that. It's not about tricking them into interacting with us. It's actually about sincerely participating in and getting involved in the things that our children are really focused in and involved in. And believe me, our children are smart, they're sharp, they know the difference. And that's the real, and you know what, honestly, you all know the difference, right? You know the difference if your friend or your spouse or your partner is just just kind of going along with something because they feel obligated to do it with you, versus when they're actually interested in your life and in what you're doing. That feels totally different for you. Feels different for our children too. So a key piece here is actually participating in and joining in with all those types of behaviors, those that we often call stimming, that everyone else is trying to stop our children from doing. Now, you might say, even as you hear me say this, and I can understand you having this concern, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. That sounds like the worst possible thing you could do. First of all, aren't you going to reinforce the very behaviors you're trying to change? I would think that this would be the very last thing that you would want to do. And you know what? People said the very same thing to my parents when they were working with me, right? They actually said to them, if he's spinning plates, you got to stop him from doing that. You got to take the plate away. You got to redirect him into something else. And I have to say, in retrospect, I'm certainly grateful my parents didn't listen to all those people. But I can actually understand you having that concern. It's a legitimate concern, especially if you haven't seen this principle in action yet or used this principle yet. Because what my parents, again, what they did is, instead of taking the plate away from me, instead of getting me to stop, they'd get a plate, they'd get down next to me, and they would spin plates with me. And actually, far from reinforcing the behavior or getting me to do it more, that was where they saw their first breakthroughs. That was the first time I looked at them, started including them in my play, and communicating with them. And this is what we see. When we join children in what they're doing, it does not reinforce the behavior. And by the way, I'm not just speaking from personal experience here. It's not like my parents just did this with me and it worked and so we said, great. We've done this with thousands of children for decades from around the world. We never see it reinforce the behavior. Quite the opposite, actually. We see these children, often for the first time, really look at us, connect with us, include us in what they're doing, and ultimately do the very behaviors we're joining in with less rather than more, and spend more and more of their time interacting. And again, a key thing to understand is that even the objection to say this is going to reinforce the behavior is based on a view of autism that isn't actually accurate. Right? What is autism at its core? Right? Oftentimes it's talked about as if it's a behavioral disorder or a learning disorder. Right? So basically it's a behavioral disorder where we have to get these children to change their behavior and stamp out these certain behaviors and promote these other ones. Or it's a learning disorder where these children just have a problem learning. And yes, our children behave very differently and they learn very differently. No question about it. But those are symptoms rather than causes. We really see that at its core, autism is a social relational disorder. It's an interactivity disorder. Basically, our children have difficulty connecting with and forming relationships with other people. Right? And that is the central deficit that our children are struggling with. And that then becomes the central focus that we try and help them with. So first of all, understand that if our children were taking all their social cues from us, they wouldn't be autistic and not a one of you would be here today. Right? So we already know that's not what our children are doing. Secondly, we really see that these children are doing these things for a reason. They're not crazy people doing these behaviors for no reason. They're doing it for a reason. Now, it's not all the same reason, but ultimately, really see where our children are coming from, which is they're trying to make sense of a world that is incredibly unpredictable and incredibly overloading from a sensory input point of view. So things that might appear very predictable to us, to our children, might appear really unpredictable, but all the time. And things that might appear easy to digest, like if we just are silent for a second. Okay, so you can hear the vent. Some of you heard the rumbling a little bit in the floor. You can hear people moving around, even breathing sometimes. But most of you, for most of this lecture, are tuning that out and focusing on the person talking. Right? For our children, in many cases, that's all coming in at the same volume. And all the sights and smells and sounds and physical sensations are coming in a really intense way. A lot of our children have a lot of sensory integration problems. That, combined with intense unpredictability 24 hours a day, it's like them being in a shopping center all the time. So ultimately, they're trying to come up with a way to digest and cope with that. And they actually do. Our children are quite brilliant and they do come up with a way to do that. But then we spend a lot of our time trying to break them of the very method they've come up with to try and digest a world that for right now is indigestible to them. And this brings up a really important piece of the program to be aware of. First of all, really important to understand and this is a common misconception, I hear it all the time, especially about the Sunrise program, which is, oh, I know what the Sunrise program, aren't you the guys that say, like, you just go with the child, you just like do what they do all the time, and then somehow they just sort of like learn to talk and be toilet trained and make friends and all that? And that sounds as ludicrous to me as it does to you, trust me. That's crazy, okay? Of course not. By joining your child, that's not going to magically teach them to speak and make friends and go to school and do all that. It doesn't teach them all that. However, it builds the platform that is necessary for all future education and growth. It builds that key interaction that you actually need to do that. So as a result, we do not join with everything our children do. We don't. And I'm not going to advocate that you do that, which is why I have this slide, and I really want to help you implement this at home. So you want to understand, you don't want to join with everything. You only want to join with certain types of activities and behaviors. So what types of activities and behaviors? Well, we call it the ism. Okay? If your child is not doing an ism, we don't join. If your child's doing an ism, then we totally, absolutely join. And it's important to get the difference with that, because one of the things that's important to understand with the Sunrise program is that the when is as important as the what. When you teach is as important as what you're teaching or even how you're teaching. So when your child is doing these repetitive behaviors over and over again, that's actually not the time to teach. It's not the time to teach anything new. It's not the time to request things. It's not the time to say, look at me, or don't do that, or look at this new toy I brought in. It's not the time to do any of that. It's actually not even really the time to set any kind of agenda whatsoever. That's the time to relationship build. Relationship build, relationship build, relationship build. That's the time to do that. And let me paint you a little bit of a picture, actually. I want you to imagine it's just a really nice day in London. And you know what? You've worked hard all week, you're a little bit exhausted, you're kind of pooped out, and you just want to do what's relaxing and easy for you on your one day off. Let's say it's a Saturday and you have the day off, and you're just going to do something relaxing. So you go to a nice park in London, and you find a nice park bench that's kind of in a secluded area, and you sit down, and let's even say you bring your two kids with you, but you have your two kids play over on the grass, and you're just sort of relaxing on the bench, and you're watching your two kids play, and it's nice. It's a sunny day out, and it's so good to just relax and blow off some steam from the whole week that you've had. And then some guy comes up to you, some loud, I don't know, bald American comes up to you, and is like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Listen, I got a great idea. There's a great movie playing just down the street in about 45 minutes. So I tell you what, forget your kids. We'll hop in the car. We'll go see a movie. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. Okay, let's go. And you're like, listen, no, thank you. First of all, I don't even really know you that well. Secondly, you know what? If I wanted to spend my free days going to a movie, that's what I'd be doing right now. But I'm not into movies. So thanks for the offer. I'm just going to hang out here and relax and watch my kids. And I look at you, I'm thinking, what's your problem? I just told you what I wanted from you. Why didn't you listen to me? I explained to you really clearly, I thought, that I wanted you to come to the movies. I'm not really sure why you didn't. You know what? Maybe I just didn't get your attention enough. So I get down here. Hey, listen to me. Look at me. There's a movie. Look at me. No laughing. Look. There's a movie in about 15 minutes now. Let's go. So, look, not your kids. Look at me. There's a movie in 15 minutes. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Let's get in the car. And now you've had a bit of enough of this. So you sort of stand up and you say, listen, back off, okay? I don't want to go to the movies with you. Just leave me alone. I just want to watch my kids. And then I realize what the problem is. You know what? I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize this earlier. The problem is your kids. See, if I get them out of the way, then you'll pay attention to me. So I grab them by the hair and I start pulling them away, thinking, oh, cool, now you'll go to the movies with me. Unfortunately, not going to happen that way, right? In fact, next Saturday, if you're on the bench and you see me coming, you're going to stand up and grab your kids and run in the opposite direction. Now, the important thing to realize is this is not because I'm some mean person trying to be mean to you and inflict pain on you and make your life difficult. Actually, my intentions are really sincere and really nice. I just want you to have fun with me and go watch a movie doing something that is really important to me. I'm not trying to make your life miserable. I have really good intentions. But you know what? It doesn't matter that I have good intentions. It doesn't matter that I'm trying to be nice. It matters to me. It doesn't really matter to you, though, because according to your experience of this whole interaction, number one, I'm really in your face. Number two, though, and more importantly, I am conveying this message to you over and over again. Hey, no, stop doing what you want. Do what I want. No, I know you want to do that. It's not what's important. Stop doing what you want and do what I want. Right? Let's take a moment, right, and slip behind our children's eyes and experience what this might be like for them. Right? So our children, they're in this world where it's just boom, 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 one unpredictable thing after another. It's craziness. It's happening. Plus, at the same time, you have sensory overload. You have all these sights and sounds that you can't properly regulate, and they're coming in, but you finally find a way to actually cope with this and to deal with this and to digest this. You finally find a way to deal with this. And you do it, and you come up with an ism, and it's some repetitive activity, and it finally, you're able to tune out everything that's coming up towards you and overloading you. You're able to tune out all of that and really get to a place that feels better for you. And yes, finally you do it. And as soon as you finally figure that out, everyone around you who loves you and who cares about you descends upon you and says, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing what you want, do what I want, stop doing what you want, do what I want. Imagine what that experience must be like. One of the things that I actually talk about oftentimes with parents and professionals who are doing the Sunrise program is if you're going to effectively do the Sunrise program, you have to learn to really be a great salesperson. But you're not selling anything that costs money. You're selling human interaction. You're selling looking in your eyes. You're selling making friends, taking turns at games. Right? You're selling all that, and you got a really finicky customer over here, which is your child. And they're pretty happy with the product they got already. So it better be a great sell. Now, would this be a great sell? Would this be a great sell? Hey, listen, I got this great thing. It's called being part of our world. It's totally awesome. And listen, here's the best part of it. When you join us in our world, you get to stop doing all the stuff you love and do all the stuff you hate. Isn't that cool? No? It's not what you want? Okay, nobody's buying that. Certainly not our children. Right? They're not buying that product.